After opening a mysterious package, experts discovered an old photograph of 5 sisters from 1846. They examined the image, zoomed in, and instantly turned pale as they made an unexpected discovery. The day had just clocked noon in Millbrook, when a young dispatch rider delivered a brown paper package to Dr. Ethel Glenfield's office. Surprised, she set her cup of tea, as well as her interesting conversation with Dr. Featherstone, aside. "Who is this from?" Dr. Ethel asked, her crisp smile fading into nothingness at the messenger's dismissive shrug. She could only wonder in silence as she signed his clipboard and watched him leave her office. Should we open it? Dr. Featherstone, her witty, middle-aged colleague, was skeptical. Evidently more than she was. However, she was no chicken. Her elderly hands trembled slightly as she opened the package and revealed the daguerreotype within. A photographic plate that she now realized had been discovered in the ruins of an old estate outside town. "It's from the local historical society," Dr. Featherstone recited, reading the small note attached to the photograph. "So much for that unnecessary suspense." Dr. Ethel let out a small, broken laugh before gazing at the old image. The local historical society had asked her to examine it, knowing her expertise in early American photography and genealogy. She adjusted her wire-rimmed spectacles and held the plate up to the window light. 5 young faces stared back at her from across nearly 2 centuries, their images captured with the surreal quality that only the earliest photographic processes could achieve. The girls appeared to be between 13 and 16 years old, standing in a perfectly straight line against what seemed to be an assembly of kids, the background softly blurred in the way that daguerreotypes naturally rendered depth. Ethel's breath caught in her throat. Something about these faces felt familiar, though she couldn't quite place why. She reached for her magnifying glass and began to study each girl more carefully. "What is it?" Dr. Featherstone asked, noticing the 57-year-old Ethel's expression. Dr. Ethel shook her head slightly. "There's something about the photo." The first girl from the left had brown hair pulled back in 4 reckless braids, her young face bearing the hint of a curious smile. Her dress, though simple linen, was dirty yet well-maintained. Beside her stood a girl of the same height with a similar hair color. Her smile, more repressed, was still visible on the surface. Both girls had a similar expression on their faces, their shoulders touching almost in sisterly conspiracy. The middle girl was more serious, her expression slightly aggressive rather than amused. Her hair was lighter than the others, almost honey-colored where it caught the light in that loose bun. She wore the same style of simple dress, but there was something in her posture that suggested a brewing anger. What seemed like a calming hand on her right shoulder must have hinted at it to Dr. Ethel, but she couldn't pronounce judgment yet. The fourth girl stood with equal gravity, though her eyes held a different quality, a depth that spoke of observation and quiet wisdom. Her hair was the darkest of the group, nearly black, and pulled back and upward so tightly it seemed to lay unimaginable emphasis on her tanned face. But it was the last girl, standing on the far right, who captured Ethel's attention most completely. This young girl bore a radiant smile that transformed her entire face. Her skin was noticeably younger and fresher than her companions, although they all had dirt smeared all over their faces. Her hair, also caught in a messy bun like the other girls, appeared slightly luscious and healthier compared to the rest. "It looks like an assembly," Dr. Featherstone deduced, eyeing the photo carefully. "You think there's something special about this?" Ethel set down her magnifying glass and sighed, overwhelmed by the sudden assignment. The 2 historians continued to examine the photo while dissecting possible theories. After 2 hours, they made a quick discovery. Using Ethel's magnifying glass, Dr. Featherstone zoomed in on the image and caught something. "I think these 2 are sisters." He was referring to the first girl on the right and the girl beside her, the tanned one, a lady of obvious mixed race. Ethel scoffed. A mixed breed in old America? Dr. Featherstone had to be joking as usual, but a split second later, something clicked. Ethel checked the zoomed image for a long time before rising to her feet quickly. She walked to her bookshelf, pulling out a thick volume of local genealogical records. Based on the nature of photography, their dressing in the background, she could deduce that this image was born sometime in the mid-19th century. So she started her search from there. Something nagged at her memory. A story she had heard years ago from her own grandmother about a family in Millbrook during the 1830s. She flipped through pages of carefully transcribed records, birth certificates, and family trees until she found what she was looking for. The Clifton family. 5 daughters born between 1830 and 1833. She read the names aloud. Edna, born 1830. Lucy, born 1831. Mabel, born 1832. Kate, born 1832. Twins then. And she paused, her finger tracing the faded ink. And Rose, born 1833. Records revealed that the Clifton girls were known throughout Millbrook for their kindness and their unusual family situation. Rose was adopted into the family as an infant, born to a freed slave woman who died in childbirth. The Cliftons, being Quakers and investors in the Underground Railroad, took her in and raised her as their own daughter. By all accounts, the 5 girls were inseparable, and Rose was never treated as anything but a beloved sister. Ethel felt her heart begin to race. She returned to the daguerreotype and studied the faces with new understanding. The easy familiarity between the girls, the way they stood close together, it all spoke of genuine familial bonds. At that moment, she got the confirmation she was looking for. These girls were the Clifton sisters. Cracked the case in a day, Dr. Featherstone chuckled, taking the book to read on. How will the Historical Society survive without you? Ethel rolled her eyes, amused. Dr. Featherstone continued reading the record notes. The Clifton family was tragically lost in a house fire in the winter of 1847. All 5 daughters perished, along with their parents. The community was devastated, as the girls were beloved for their charitable work and their music. They often performed together at church gatherings and community events. The weight of this discovery settled over the pair like a heavy blanket. Their faces had turned pale. Here was a photograph of 5 young women who had lived, laughed, and loved together. Sisters not by blood in all cases, but by choice and circumstance. In an era when racial mixing was not only uncommon, but often dangerous, the Clifton family had created something beautiful and radical. A truly integrated family, built on love, rather than convention. Ethel's phone rang, startling her from her reverie. It was Paloma McKinley from the Historical Society. Dr. Glenfield, have you had a chance to look at that photo we sent over? Yes, Ethel said, her voice thick with emotion. Paloma, I believe we've discovered something quite remarkable. This isn't just any old photograph. It's a documentation of one of the most progressive families in Millbrook's history. What do you mean? Ethel carefully explained her findings, the genealogical records, and the story of the Clifton sisters. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. My God, Paloma finally whispered. Do you realize what this means? We have photographic evidence of an integrated family from 1846, nearly 20 years before the Civil War ended. This is extraordinary. Ethel's gaze landed on the photograph one more time. Now that they had figured out what and who they were examining, all that was left was understanding the context of the photograph. Where were the girls? What year was the picture taken? And most importantly, where were they? The dirt on their faces, the dirty clothing, and their semi-happy, semi-angry expressions. These factors hinted at a bigger picture, something the experts were missing in the groundbreaking discovery. The more she looked, the more she began to notice other details that spoke to the girls' personalities and their time together. The slight wrinkle in Edna's skirt suggested she had been fidgeting, perhaps impatient with the long exposure time required for early photographs. Lucy's hand was positioned protectively near Kate's shoulder, the gesture of a sister accustomed to looking out for others. Meanwhile, Kate's serious expression seemed to be directed slightly off-camera, as if she was watching for something or someone behind the device. And Rose, beautiful, radiant Rose, stood with the confidence of someone who had never been made to feel that she didn't belong. There was no smile on her dark face, and only her expression next to Kate's seemed to portray a deep sense of unhappiness for their current situation. Dr. Ethel studied the photograph more intently, her magnifying glass revealing details that made her pulse quicken. The background, which she had initially dismissed as blurred children, began to take on a more distinct form. These weren't just any children. They appeared to be dressed in similar simple worn clothing, and their postures suggested something more organized than a casual gathering. Featherstone, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Look at this again. Really look. Dr. Featherstone leaned over her shoulder, adjusting his own spectacles. What am I missing? The children in the background. They look around the same age. Ethel's hands trembled as she traced the edges of the photograph. And look here, at the corner. There's something etched into the plate itself. Using her strongest magnifying glass, they could barely make out tiny scratched numbers. 8/15/1846. August 15th, 1846, Dr. Featherstone read aloud. But that's more than a year before the fire. Why do they look so... He paused, the realization dawning on him simultaneously with Ethel. Poor, Ethel finished. Why do 5 girls from one of Millbrook's most prosperous Quaker families look like they've been living rough? The answer came to her like a lightning bolt. She rushed back to her genealogical records, this time searching not for birth records, but for newspaper archives from 1836. Her fingers flew through the digital database until she found what made her blood run cold. Earlier records revealed that a local Quaker family had rescued 14 children from an illegal holding facility. It was the Clifton family. Due to their involvement in the Underground Railroad, they discovered and reported a horrific situation at an abandoned estate, where children as young as 8 were being held in deplorable conditions, apparently destined for illegal indenture contracts outside town. Dr. Featherstone's face went pale. Dear God. Ethel continued reading. Among the rescued were 12 children of various backgrounds, including several of mixed race, who had been kidnapped or sold into what authorities are calling a form of child trafficking. The Clifton daughters, Edna, Lucy, Mabel, Kate, and Rose, personally participated in the rescue operation, spending 3 days at the site caring for the traumatized children before proper arrangements could be made. The photograph suddenly made perfect sense. The dirt on their faces, the worn clothing, the mix of determination and sadness in their expressions, especially in Kate and Rose's faces. They weren't poor children. They were privileged young women who had deliberately put themselves in harm's way to save others. Ethel further learned that the Clifton family had commissioned the daguerreotype to document the rescue operation and serve as evidence in the subsequent legal proceedings. It was taken by traveling photographer Jeremiah Hartwell, who donated his services to the cause. This isn't just a family photograph, Ethel realized, her voice thick with emotion. It's evidence, legal documentation of one of the earliest recorded child trafficking rescues in American history. Those kids in the background were the children the Cliftons saved. Dr. Featherstone sat heavily in his chair. No wonder the Historical Society wanted this examined. Do you think they knew? I don't think anyone knew the full story, Ethel replied. Look at this final entry. All 14 rescued children were successfully placed with loving families throughout the city. The illegal operation was shut down and several arrests were made. The Clifton family's courage and compassion set a precedent for organized child welfare efforts that wouldn't be seen again until the establishment of formal orphanages decades later. The two historians sat in stunned silence, looking at the photograph with new eyes. These 5 young women, the oldest barely 16, had risked everything to save children who had no one else. Not to mention, their families set the stage for the orphanage system that Millbrook's child welfare adopted years later. The fire, Dr. Featherstone said suddenly. The house fire that killed them all in 1847. Ethel's heart sank as she searched for more information. What she found made her gasp. Following the tragic incident in February, investigators suspected arson in connection with the family's testimony in the trial of the child trafficking ring. They were murdered, Ethel whispered. They saved those children and someone killed them for it. Dr. Ethel wiped tears from her eyes as she looked at the photograph one final time. In those young faces, she now saw not just 5 sisters, but 5 heroes who had sacrificed everything for love and justice. The photograph wasn't just evidence of an integrated family. It was proof of the profound courage that defined America's hidden heroes, young women who chose compassion over comfort and justice over safety. This changes everything we thought we knew about child welfare and what young people were capable of in that era, Dr. Featherstone said softly. Ethel nodded, carefully placing the daguerreotype in its protective case. And it shows us that some bonds are stronger than blood, stronger than race, stronger even than death. These girls had innocently posed for a photograph, unaware that it would shed light on an obscured part of history decades later. When she called Paloma back, Ethel's voice was steady, despite her emotions. "We need to prepare for something much bigger than we thought." And with that, a month-long preparation for a local exhibition went underway. Other historians and experts visited Millbrook's Historical Society to examine the photograph to see whether it was worth the effort. They eventually discovered that it was. Dr. Glenfield and Dr. Featherstone were right in their discovery and assessment. The photograph would go on display with a new plaque. The Clifton Sisters, 1846. Heroes of the Underground Railroad and pioneers of child welfare. In saving others, they saved the orphanage system as we know it today. And in the corner of the exhibit, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, were the names of 14 children whose lives began the day 5 brave sisters decided that love was stronger than fear. What a heartwarming story of courage and compassion. What do you think of the Clifton Sisters' story? Would you go out of your way to save people in a similar fashion? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in our next video.